Today, we begin with a development that U.S. defense officials and intelligence leaders had feared, tracked, and quietly prepared for. A development that unfolded not over months, not over weeks, but in a single day. A single day that forced emergency meetings inside the Pentagon. A single day that triggered calls for immediate sanction escalation. A single day that changed the posture of U.S. policy toward Vladimir Putin. What Putin authorized today crossed a line that Washington had hoped would hold. And when that line broke, the Pentagon did not hesitate. They responded with speed, coordination, and unmistakable resolve. For weeks now, there had been signals not from official Kremlin statements, not from press conferences, but from quiet intelligence indicators that Vladimir Putin was preparing something unusual. Putin has been aggressive, yes, but he has also been predictable in his aggression. His actions have followed a certain rhythm, a pattern, almost a script. Escalate, pause, deny, deflect, then escalate again. But what set off alarm bells inside the Pentagon and U.S. intelligence agencies this week was that the pattern went silent. Analysts who monitor Russian behavior know the indicators. The sudden drop in encrypted command traffic, the repositioning of financial and energy intermediaries, the quiet movement of sanctioned adjacent entities, and most importantly, the absence of propaganda. All of that went quiet. And whenever Putin goes quiet, it means something is about to get very loud. Early this morning, intelligence agencies detected what they described as coordinated financial and strategic signaling, including restricted banking maneuvers and state-backed asset shielding that had not been observed in over a year. These are the kinds of moves Putin only authorizes when he is signaling something very specific. A test of Western resolve, a preparation for escalation, or an attempt to harden Russia's economy against punishment. Observers didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that Russia was changing posture. And when a nuclear-armed adversary shifts posture without explanation even slightly, the Pentagon pays attention. The response issued by Pentagon leadership and senior administration officials tonight was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Source after source coming out of classified briefings and emergency consultations described Putin's move as deliberate, provocative, and perhaps most importantly, economically strategic, meaning it was designed to limit the effectiveness of future punishment. But that strategy only works if the target hesitates. Washington did not. In fact, the response we saw today was among the fastest coordinated policy reactions we've seen since the early days of the Ukraine invasion. Within hours of confirmation, U.S. officials began drafting immediate sanction escalation packages, not the symbolic kind, but deep impact measures that target financial lifelines Russia still relies on. Today, senior administration sources confirmed that the United States initiated accelerated sanction planning against key Russian financial, energy, and logistics nodes. These include shadow banking networks facilitating sanctions evasion, energy revenue channels previously spared to stabilize markets, and intermediary firms recently reactivated after months of dormancy. The U.S. moved before Putin could complete his repositioning. They targeted liquidity pathways. They targeted insurance backstops. They targeted transaction clearing mechanisms that would have enabled Russia to weather another round of economic isolation. In other words, they targeted the machinery, not the messaging. This is what made the Pentagon's response so urgent. Putin's move wasn't symbolic, it was actionable. Left unchecked, it could have blunted future sanctions, preserved war funding, and prolonged the conflict. Instead, Washington struck first strategically, not emotionally. They didn't overreact. They didn't grandstand. They hit the pressure points that matter most. And this is where the story becomes even more intense. U.S. Analysts now believe Putin's latest move was designed to test the credibility of Western enforcement after months of political fatigue and global distraction. Putin wanted to see whether Washington would respond slowly. Instead, the opposite happened. The response was so rapid, so coordinated, that even Moscow noticed. You don't get Putin's attention easily. But today, the Pentagon did. One senior intelligence analyst, speaking anonymously, described Putin's maneuver as a financial feint, a way to probe Western reaction time. But the response proved that the U.S. remains both alert and decisive. The actions taken today were not just forceful, they were surgically precise, targeting systems rather than symbolism. That matters, because it shows something crucial. The United States is not reacting blindly. It is actively shaping the battlefield. As reports continued throughout the day, the scale of the response became clearer. Treasury officials accelerated enforcement actions, forcing immediate compliance reviews. Energy regulators targeted entities that had quietly resumed Russian-linked operations. Intelligence agencies moved to expose and disrupt sanction evasion corridors. This wasn't just policy. This was economic warfare coordination. This was strategic containment. And containment is something Putin has struggled with since the war began. For every workaround Russia has built, Washington has now demonstrated it can close the door faster than Moscow can open another. Remember, Putin believed several things early on. He believed Western unity would fracture. He believed sanctions fatigue would set in. He believed the U.S. political system would paralyze decisive action. But today, the opposite is happening. Unity is holding, sanctions are escalating, and decisiveness is accelerating. What makes this moment so volatile and so revealing is that Putin's move comes at a time of extraordinary pressure inside Russia. Hardliners want escalation. Oligarchs want stability. Regional leaders want funding. And the military wants resources it's not getting. Putin is balancing all of that while managing a prolonged war. Leaders in that position don't make sudden moves from strength. They make them from vulnerability. The Pentagon statement, now circulating across allied capitals, was designed to signal one thing clearly. The United States will not allow Russia to insulate itself from consequences. Officials described Putin's actions as inconsistent with international economic norms. That's diplomatic language for, you crossed a line and we are responding. You don't hear that tone unless the stakes are serious. Meanwhile, the U.S. president addressed the nation in a firm, measured speech. He said, "We are watching closely." He said, "We will respond decisively." And he said, "No one should doubt our resolve." These weren't rhetorical flourishes. They were strategic signals. And here's what makes the situation more concerning. Putin's move wasn't isolated. Alongside it, Russian-aligned financial actors increased cross-border activity, energy intermediaries shifted transaction structures, cyber probing against Western institutions intensified, all within the same 24-hour window. That suggests coordination, and coordination suggests planning. Analysts are now weighing several possibilities. One, Putin is preparing for prolonged economic confrontation. Two, he is attempting to lock in war funding before tougher sanctions hit. Three, and most concerning, he is testing whether escalation deterrence still works. Today, Washington removed that doubt. They didn't delay, they didn't hedge, they didn't deflect, they escalated. What we are watching now is a test of resolve. Putin wants to see how far he can push. The Pentagon wants to show there is no ambiguity. U.S. allies want to prevent fragmentation, and global markets want stability. Those forces are colliding right now. Today, officials confirm ongoing monitoring. They say enforcement is tightening. They say more measures are ready. And they say today's response sent a clear message to Putin. This won't work. Two allies. Washington is engaged. As the next days unfold, we'll learn more about what Putin hoped to achieve. But what we know now is this. The response was timely. It preserved leverage. And it reset the balance. What happens next depends on Moscow. If Putin retreats, this will be remembered as deterrence working. If he escalates, the Pentagon has already shown it's ready. And today, for the first time in weeks, Moscow is quiet, too quiet. And when Putin is quiet, it means he's calculating. Because today, he was reminded of three things. Pressure works, resolve matters, and the Pentagon is watching. This story is far from over. But today, one thing is clear. The escalation has begun. The response is real, and the world is paying attention. We'll be here watching every move.